So thank you all for joining us this afternoon to hear from some of your peers about what their campus's achievements have been this past year. My name is Michelle Medea. I'm Senior Director of Programs and Communications at Second Nature. As Tim mentioned, in previous Pursuit meetings, we have opened each individual session with a land acknowledgement, and those have been a very meaningful part of our journey. I am in Virginia, where 50,000 Indigenous people lived at the time of colonization. Of the more than 30 tribes in this Powhatan chiefdom, only the Pamunkey and the Mattaponi have maintained their land from 17th century treaties. And yet they still continue to make annual ceremonial payments to the Virginia governor, which is astounding. So it's clear that our work does not begin and end with these acknowledgements. So we're thinking critically about how to translate these statements into programming, policy, and practice. And I invite you to contact me directly, and I'll put my email in the chat, with any feedback on how your university and community has navigated these conversations. Also, if you have any easy to reference examples or links that you want to share with everybody in the chat, please feel free to do so now. For this session, each presenter will share in 5 to 7 minutes what they're most proud of and how other participants can take action. The speakers will introduce themselves, and I invite you to go look on Sched. All of their photos and bios are there, so you can read more about them. Also, at the end, I'll be sharing a contact sheet so you can contact them individually to follow up with any questions that you have. Presentation topics will include an overview of cutting-edge resiliency and decarbonization plans. We'll talk about how endowments are investing in ways that can accelerate the shift to an equitable, low-carbon economy, and actionable strategies to engage and activate current students and alumni in climate action. So they're going to go rather quickly, like TED Talks. We may have a few minutes at the end for Q&A, but if we don't, please, again, feel free to contact everybody. I'll provide their emails to you. And just want to shout out, there's a lot of Midwest representation today. So that's something that's great. So we're happy to see that. But before we turn to our Midwest schools, I'm going to kick it over to Amy Dvorak at Lewis and Clark College to get us started. And if you do have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. We'll get to them if we can. If not, we'll save a transcript of those questions and try to get back to them later. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Michelle, and everyone for being here today. My name is Amy Dvorak. I'm the Sustainability Director at Lewis and Clark College in Portland, Oregon, and we are undergraduate school and 2 graduate schools with 1.3 million square feet and about 3,500 students, so on the smaller side. And we, like many of you, signed on to the President's Climate Commitment in 2007. And that was really a plan that was focused at the time on a few things, which I'm sure will sound familiar to all of you. It was really around energy efficiency, a little bit on the endowment, green building policies, purchasing policies, transportation policies, those types of programs that at the time really made a lot of sense, right? And as we moved from that 2008, 2009 plan, to now, so much has changed. I know so much has changed for all of you too, but we weren't talking about fuel switching. We were really talking about electrification. Equity and inclusion was largely left out of that conversation. And then the whole immersion of science-based targets, right, in the last number of years has sort of come out of that. So as we look towards updating our plan, at kind of the 10-year mark, we really wanted to do something more with it and be kind of go beyond this idea of energy efficiencies and then just kind of RECs and offsets as like the primary components of the plan. For me personally, I don't know about for all of you, but I was really struggling to figure out how do we do that? Like, how do we actually decarbonize our systems and operations? And it was a struggle, as I'm sure for some of you, it has been too, trying to figure out how do we do that? Luckily, we're not the first, and we'll hear from other people on this session today that are farther along than we are. Right now, we are in the idea development stage and also starting to share those early ideas with our community. So I'm kind of coming at it from that perspective for those who are maybe in a similar place of like talking to people about our ideas, getting their feedback, starting to flesh them out as far as, engineering studies, deeper dives into how can these systems work for us and how do they make sense in terms of our location, our education, what we're planning to do with our buildings long term, particularly here in Oregon, as some others are dealing with this too. we're dealing with, really erratic temperature swings. So a lot warmer summers. We had a major heat wave this past summer where we had 115, 116 degree days. And we're in an area where not everybody's air conditioned. So, how can we provide more air conditioning? We're also dealing with smoke and increasing wildfires. So how can we provide more ventilation? And then an aging campus that really has a lot of deferred maintenance and just need to be updated. So we're kind of dealing with all of those at once and trying to figure out how we move forward. Luckily, we got the pro bono grant, the last round. I encourage anybody who needs help and feels stuck to participate in that if you can. And they helped us kind of start to envision something. So we really focused on electricity, cooling and heating. So sort of scope 1, scope 2. We're doing scope 3 more as an internal process. Here's a little bit on our emissions profile. As you guys can see, we've got metric tons of carbon dioxide here on the vertical axis. So we were kind of started out between the 8,000, 9,000 range and came down to closer to 6,000, 7,000 over the last 10 years. A bulk of this is from our natural gas use and then our electricity. Recently, just here in Oregon, some legislation was passed that our grid will be greening over time. So by 2040, we're supposed to have 100% renewable energy on our grid. So we're really targeting that 2040 date for us to electrify our systems and switch them over as the grid is greening. It will help us too. So here's kind of the plan. And I wanted to share this with you all briefly, and then also talk a little bit about what I'm most proud of and the lessons that we've learned to date. So like I said, we're kind of in this sharing this like I am right now. We're sharing this with community members. So we're meeting with budget and planning, facilities and operations, different education and curricular components across campus and saying, here's kind of where we think we're at. What do you think? And then starting to do the deeper dives on those as we're going. So our first kind of layer of work that we're going to be doing is really revamping our strategic energy management program and starting, as I know some of you have, an energy revolving fund. We don't have that currently, and it's something that we're planning or hoping to do as we move into this next phase so we can continue to make improvements into our system. We've also got a great community solar program here in Oregon that just recently started. So we're looking to invest into the community solar, at least for the next 20 years before the grid changes really happen. And also kind of continuing to invest in, we have some solar on campus, but continuing to invest that as it makes sense, not as our sort of primary electricity strategy, if you will, but as a supplement and all for resiliency purposes, more so than like trying to produce all of our energy. And then we do have some electric vehicles within our fleet and on our campus. And so, how we can expand and support that infrastructure over time is something we'll be continuing to do. The big piece, and I think you'll hear from other folks today, is we're looking at a low temperature hot water system. So a heat trading and geothermal, hopefully. We haven't started the engineering to see if that's feasible on our campus. How much it's going to cost. We have some kind of general ideas of what we think that's going to be. But, beyond that,
Hi, Amy, sorry, 6 minute.
Oh, and I'm at 6 minutes. Shoot. Okay. Do you want me to do the lessons learned, or should I save that for later? I can say them quick.
Go for it.
Okay, cool. I'm going to escape out of this. So real quick, the things I wanted to share, I always tell my students, I'm like, get to the good stuff. Don't spend so much time on the background, which I just did. The lessons learned for us, I think the thing I'm most proud about, because I can tell you honestly, I'm holding my breath every time we have these meetings with people for someone to be like, no, we can't do this. We can't afford it. We shouldn't, all the reasons why, we shouldn't. And people have been so enthusiastic and supportive. It's been great. So far, so good, like knocking on wood. So that's the thing that I've been most proud of. Our facilities folks, as I'm sure for some of you, like figuring out how to work with them and bring them along. I think they've been really kind of downtrodden over the years, just with the level of deferred maintenance and some of the lack of investment that we've made into like resetting the clock, they call it, on some of these buildings. So really kind of treating them differently and, being specific and intentional about how we work with them. I had some of the groups that I talked to that said, hey, we wanted to be involved sooner. Like, actually, this is great, but it feels like we would have wanted to be involved a couple of months ago and like ongoing more meetings. So sometimes I think I'm a little bit too careful. I don't want to take up too much of people's time, but it turns out they wanted more time. Oh, another big question, I hopefully folks will get to this later, is, figuring out when to involve student government specifically. So we have some students who are involved and who are supportive, right? But like if we get student governments to say, like, give us an official, we want to do this statement, figuring out that timing. The other thing we're thinking about too, and I'm hoping others will talk about this, is if we own and operate these systems ourselves, or if we working with third party to own and operate these systems. So that's another big question for us. And that's it, I'll stop.
Thanks, Amy. I think we're going to turn it next to Elizabeth at Virginia Wesleyan University.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Elizabeth Malcolm. I'm a professor and director of sustainability at Virginia Wesleyan University, which is a small liberal arts college in southeastern Virginia. Go to the next slide. So what I'm most excited about this year is a big achievement with our endowment. So in August, our president announced that we received a private donation of $80.2 million, which more than doubled our endowment. And it was designated for the endowment of our Baton Honors College. And so the size of the gift was exciting. It's the biggest gift we've received, but also the donor specifically wanted it invested with ESG criteria. And she designated Brown Advisory, who's a member of IEN, to manage it. And she wanted it to be an example for other institutions. And then in short order in October, our Board of Trustees actually voted for our whole endowment to have ESG criteria and Brown Advisory to be the outsourced chief investment officer for the entire university's endowment, which was very exciting, especially at the February milestone afterwards. I remember my students asking me who attended, do we have ESG criteria for our endowment? And I had to say, no, we're working on it. It's a slow process. And then it just happened really quickly, which was exciting. So I just wanted to share a couple, I think, of the factors that helped us to get there that might be useful for some of you thinking about some of these things. So you can go to the next slide. So I think the prominence and focus on sustainability and the environment really took off when we built in 2016 the Greer Environmental Sciences Center, which you see in the photo. And it was designed as a living laboratory. It's a LEED green building. And it just really changed, I think, the campus culture and community, and showed our how important sustainability was to us as an institution, and helped with recruiting students. And our previous president, as well as our current president, valued, they made it clear that they valued the environment and sustainability. We're in the Chesapeake Bay watershed, and our current president, recognized our role as being stewards, environmental stewards, but also training the next generation of stewards. And he saw that many of our donors and board members also really valued that. And we're also signatories to the climate commitment. We're members of IEN, so Second Nature and IEN have also been really helpful in terms of moving us along our path and providing us with important information and resources. So I really want to thank them as well. Another pivotal step was the creation of the Baton Honors College, which is what that big gift was for the endowment of. So if you go to the next slide, it was founded in 2017, and the focus is to prepare students to be both global leaders and environmental stewards. And we bring in 40 high achieving students every year to this residential honors college. And some of the coursework that they have, interdisciplinary coursework, includes sustainability and the environment. And the program's been really successful. The students have been great. They've done really well. And that really was kind of pivotal in us getting that gift to our endowment. And then the other thing, when I talked to my president about, what helped him bring the board to this decision, the other thing he said was we created environmental guiding principles. So if you go to the next slide, he was inspired by Allegheny College, who has environmental guiding principles. And so he asked our environmental council to come up with environmental guiding principles for our university. And so we based ours on Alleghenies, and then we also thought about, what's unique about us and what do we value in terms of our role in the environment and sustainability. So we thought about things like our location in the Chesapeake Bay and coastal Virginia, and how we wanted to be good environmental stewards and train the next generation of environmental stewards. And then we included goals and practices. And one of the practices, the last one, the last thing on this slide is that it says we will incorporate environmental and social concerns as a priority in university decision-making, planning, and investing. And he said that having these environmental guiding principles that were approved by the Board of Trustees was a way that he could keep this idea of sustainability and being environmental stewards in front of the board and help them recognize their role in moving us in that direction. So I think that's been really helpful. And I'll put in the chat a link to our environmental guiding principles in case other people are interested in taking a look at it. And you can go to the next slide. And if anybody ever wants to contact me with questions or ideas, please feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Appreciate it. And Martha, we're going to turn to you.
Okay, I'll share a screen just for a couple of fun pictures in the background. I am the manager of campus energy and sustainability at Carleton College. We're a small liberal arts college in Northfield, Minnesota, about 45 minutes from Minneapolis. We have 2,000 students and about 2 million square feet of land and built area. And my 5-minute update today really is bookended by Second Nature, because Second Nature is what prompted us to begin in earnest these sustainability efforts through the carbon commitment. We wrote our climate action plan in 2011, which was 4 years after we signed the carbon commitment. So we were a little behind, but they also hired my position for the first time as a result of being committed and not having done anything. So it really did spur the beginning. Our plan is now 10 years old, and we were also a recipient of a pro bono grant to work with Brailsford and Dunleavy, just like Amy, on what we're calling CAP 2.0. So what's next? What has happened since 2011 is what I'm talking about today. So we're very poised for a what's next moment. We did a complete campus energy transition from high pressure steam heating to low temperature hot water and geothermal heating and cooling system. So here's a few pictures from the field. It was a 8-year project overall, 5 years of construction. And this is the drilling rigs right in our campus quad in front of our chapel. So it was very visible, very disruptive, but we told all of our students, staff, and faculty that this is a once in a generation project that they are witnessing. So it helped to kind of ease the pain there. We also tied it to a lot of curriculum and research opportunities for particularly geology students, but also physics students, chemistry, environmental studies, art history. Quite a few disciplines have now been involved with this project in many, many ways. Here are pictures of our geology students out there working with the drillers alongside them, taking soil samples from what was grade to 520 feet deep. We had 300 bores. One field was horizontal, 2 fields were vertical. And the students basically got to witness and touch and feel and see all of these layers of soil that they had only studied in books previously. So our student here on the left said she could see the prehistoric beach that exists under Carleton at 520 feet below the surface. We finished the project just this year. So in May, we turned off steam for the last time. And in the picture with the 2 women and the Earth flag, you can see a poof of steam back there. We blew off steam for the last time, which was a big, huge event coordinated with our convocation and a speech from our president to really honor the past. The boiler operators on the left there, the guy in the yellow vest is our last full-time steam boiler operator. He was just about to retire on really in line with this project. So we made a very conscientious celebration of the past while we were also turning to the future. And then what this is doing for us is it allows us to decrease our gas use by 60%. Well, we're kind of watching that as the temperatures are hotter and colder in the winters, but we're mostly electrified now because we're using a geothermal heat pump. And because our grid is getting greener in Minnesota, some of that decarbonization is happening outside of our control in a good way, because our power company has committed to being 80% carbon free by 2030 and 100% by 2050. So what is this doing for our greenhouse gas emissions? You can see a couple of early achievements there with wind turbine that we put on our meter. and then some greening of the grid. And then the last big dip was our geothermal project. So we're now 67% less carbon than we were in 2008, which was a year after we signed the commitment. We're using, as I said, 60% less gas, about 11% more electricity. Our staff are now day staff. They don't have to staff the high pressure boiler plant around the clock. And our EUI has gone from over 100 to somewhere around 65. That's our energy use intensity for the campus. And so again, now here we are with, again, Second Nature stepping in to help us think about what's next with our Brailsford and Dunleavy study. So I don't have anything conclusive yet, but we were able to survey a number of options for CAP 2.0 and start to point get our direction set for the next steps. And with that, I will pass it on to Jerry at University of Illinois.
Hello. My name is Jerry Melchiori, and I am the Senior Director of Investments for the University of Illinois system. And my office oversees the system's $4.2 billion in combined operating and endowment assets. We formally launched a responsible investing program in April of 2020, which was fun timing, as you can imagine. And if you think about responsible investing in kind of two lanes, so the first being full divestment and cutting off funding from companies, and the second being acting as an active owner or investor and adjusting funding levels and actively engaging with management to affect change, we leaned hard into the active owner approach. So today I'll provide context as to what being an active owner means to us, and then I'll conclude with the challenge that we've faced with this approach. So the first method of implementation and what we consider to be the foundation of our program is serving as the seed investor to an ESG strategy with BlackRock. This was the first strategy to ever apply BlackRock's proprietary environmental, social, and governance factors. And what was special to us about this investment was our ability to make an exponential impact in two ways. The first is that this strategy is a great alternative for passive equity investors. There are trillions of dollars in passive equity investment and not many great low-cost, low-tracking error alternatives. So by serving as a seed investor, we valued the potential to be able to provide a responsible investing option for this vast universe of capital. The second way we've been able to effectively multiply our impact is through management engagement that is conducted by BlackRock on our behalf. BlackRock is often the largest investor or owner in public companies, so they have a unique ability to sit at the table with management and boards to negotiate or even dictate change. We're seeing real consequences stemming from management engagement, particularly in the energy industry in the form of replacing board members. So this has increased interest substantially in this form of activism in recent months. We've also experienced great investment performance from this strategy. So it's really been a great success all around. The second method of implementation is through private market investments that support environmental and social initiatives. By simply making our consultant aware that we are interested in these types of investments, we've seen significantly more deal flow. We always make decisions as fiduciaries first with financial objectives at the forefront, but we found if you take time to think innovatively about the ways to participate in these markets, there are some very attractive opportunities out there. One recent example of a private market investment we made was actually in a mining fund, and it focuses on the responsible extraction of metals and battery materials that are not only necessary for the electronic vehicle and energy transition, but also expected to be in major shortages over the coming decade. The final method is through farmland. The university system has over 14,000 acres of Illinois farmland in its care, including a substantial farm property in our endowment pool. There's much that we can do with this tangible resource. To date, we've added renewable energy infrastructure such as wind turbines, as well as agroforestry projects on non-productive land. We've partnered with our farmers and researchers on projects focusing on water preservation, the reduction of nitrogen and irrigation runoff, soil conservation, and land conservation. The range of opportunities for protecting the environment with practices employed on our farmland are vast and a unique aspect of our program. So I hope this gave you some context around how we see being an active investor and maybe even a few ideas for implementing it on your own campuses. But I would like to conclude with a challenge we've faced recently, and that's through student acceptance. The most prominent voices of our student body still demand divestment regarding a number of issues. While we've watched the industry gain an understanding around the value of the active investor approach, as well as the importance of supporting the energy transition, we've not yet gotten there with our student body. And becoming a model for higher education student engagement was a goal of our program from the onset, and we've been sidelined due to COVID and many of the initiatives we'd intended to advance this relationship. So this is going to be a high priority for my team in the next year. And I will turn it over to Shane from the University of Kentucky.
Thanks, Jerry. I appreciate that. And I think that my slides should be popping up. Yeah, here they come. This presentation will be a good complement, very similar in subject matter. We're a little not quite as far along. And so going to share a story of kind of how we got to a point that honestly, even for me, is a little surprising to be at the University of Kentucky. So in the fall, we'll be launching a student managed investment fund. We're projected to have 2 million under assets under management, which from what I can tell, will put it in kind of a top tier in terms of size for AUM. And that's a surprising leadership position for the University of Kentucky to occupy. It'll be a carve out from the university's main endowment. You can go to the next slide. We'll start with just a quick snapshot of where we are, who we are. We're a public Research One land grant university located in Lexington, which is a city of about 300,000. We've got 30,000 students, 2,500 faculty, about 15,000 staff. So we're the fourth largest city in the state of Kentucky if we were to compare it that way. Health sciences is a huge component of what we do. So this is actually a green roof on our hospital in the photo there. But our health sciences, our professional schools, and 3 hospitals are all located on the same campus as our undergraduate stuff, which is a unique alignment. And we've got a $2.1 billion endowment. ASHI Star Silver rating 2019. So it's a quick snapshot there. Next slide. How we got here, similar story. We've had a lot of student activism around divestment, very vocal, relatively small group that worked hard for several years. And as a result of their work and the visibility they created around the issue, we were able to open a really meaningful dialogue with our chief investment officer, our treasurer, myself, and through that group interact with the investment committee for our board of trustees. The student organization came with several key goals for their campaign, and front and center was divestment from the fossil fuel or from the carbon 200. But they had several other goals. There was not much common ground with our investment committee or our chief investment officer around using a negative screen for managing the endowment. Bunch of reasons for that. I'm not going to do a deep dive on those right now, but there was a lot of interest and enthusiasm for staying at the table with the students to see where the common ground could be found. One of the ways that they did that was through a total rebuild of the website. So our university's endowment website was completely inaccessible, I would say, unless you were a member of the investment sector or a member of our investment committee. And so everything that you see on the right 2/3 of the screen is kind of new aspects of that website, and it's still not super engaging, but you can figure out what an endowment is. And even our investment team built out a full thesaurus and dictionary of investing terms. And so when students were in meetings and people started talking about equities and securities and large cap versus small cap, they would glaze over. They weren't able to feel like they could stay actively engaged in those discussions because they didn't have the vocabulary. And they made the point that, hey, if we're willing to dedicate our time as advocates and we are having trouble keeping up, then students who aren't engaging this as advocates are going to have no idea where to even start with some of this. And so the rebuild of the website was a great piece of common ground and created relationships between the student leaders and our investment leaders. because of that, last year, so 2020, 2021, student leadership shifted. The university's environmental club took over the divestment campaign, and the leadership of that club was open to additional pathways toward cooperation and progress. And so divestment became less of an all or nothing goal. And the idea of education and integrating this into the educational experience of our students became much more prominent. Next slide. The real breakthrough moment for this particular class came when the students met with one of the instructors that leads one of our traditional student managed investment funds. So we have one at the undergraduate level, one at the graduate level. They both have 3 or 4 million in assets under management. And we met with John Chait. And so it was the students and I, and John had, read the email. He came to the meeting. He said, look, all you need to do is tell Todd to tell Eric to give me $2 million and I'll teach the class. And the students and I, like, all of our jaws kind of dropped. And like miraculously, about 5 months later, that's a pretty good description of what happened. And so Todd's our chief investment officer, Eric's our executive vice president for finance administration. They had a discussion of it. We engaged the dean from the business school. The dean got incredibly excited, not because of kind of the save the world aspects of it, but he said ESG, responsible investing, impact investing, is the fastest growing sector of finance and investing. And if we're not preparing our students to be ready for that, we are doing a disservice as a college and as a university. And so he got very excited about it. And that really opened the door for this $2 million carve out. I need to note that 2 million is, okay. That 2 million is contingent upon a vote in February by our investment committee, but all signs are that it'll be approved. We are going to have a very low market cap minimum to maximize the number of companies that the students can invest in. We're going to run a 2-semester approach to this, with the fall semester being primarily lecture for large number of students, and spring being a smaller group where a lot of the active management of the portfolio happens. And we intend to kind of force the sale of about 1/3 of the portfolio every year so that the students are involved in turnover. And I'll stop there because I think I'm at time.
Thanks, Shane. Appreciate it. And I just want to encourage folks, we're doing well on time, so please do add questions to the chat or to the Q&A, and we should have some time at the end to address them. So Cindy, you're up next.
Thank you. So I'm Cynthia Klein-Benai, Assistant Vice Chancellor and Director of Sustainability at the University of Illinois, Chicago. So Jerry and I are at the same overall institution, but we each have our own campuses. And I'd like to present a climate resilience adaptation project that forges new ways to work with the community partners in a socially just way. So just a little background on the campus. Next slide. We are a large public research university located in one of the most diverse universities in the nation. Forgive the trains going by. Located very close to public transit. And in 2016, our Chancellor Emeritus signed the updated Second Nature climate commitment. We had been originally signatories in 2007. And he introduced the UIC climate commitments that consist of the goals of climate neutral, zero waste, carbon neutral, zero waste, net zero water, and biodiverse campus, as well as teaching and learning. And then, of course, we also worked on climate resilience, and that plan and developed a climate action implementation plan known as our CAPE. We did work with the predecessors to Bradsford and Dunleavy to develop our plan as well back in 2018. But this project is a collaboration with the Energy Initiative, which is co-led by Elizabeth Coach. And that part of that organization within the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, focuses on energy and sustainability to foster Chicago's growing energy and sustainability ecosystem. Next slide, please. Our community partner in this endeavor is the Urban Growers Collective Green Era and Green Era, and their leader is Erica Allen. She's been leading mostly urban agriculture initiatives in Chicago for over, I would say, 20 years, and we're partnering with them. Next slide. So our initial kind of engagement with them stemmed from, well, in 2019 or 2020, we were planning to do a big Earth Day panel on climate justice. It got deferred till 2020 and evolved to be a climate justice workshop. It was funded by our Institute for Policy and Civic Engagement. And in that workshop, we engaged with Erica and her coalition of community partners to discuss what are the challenges of working with a university on issues of environmental and climate justice. And she is a force of nature. She's really leading the way to achieve climate and environmental justice for her community. And she's quite critical of the way universities work, much of what we've heard throughout the climate pursuit and in terms of how community partners feel about universities. She's expressed. She feels we're really not transparent to her community and can also often capitalize on the work of communities. And by all those things that we've learned. So she also has ideas about how to solve that. And UIC staff and faculty feel we're working well and fairly with the community. Many of our faculty do so. And we're striving to overcome those barriers and misconceptions on both sides through this project. Next slide. So the project that Erica is leading is a 9-acre Green Era project that will create jobs and generate wealth to support the reinvestment of Auburn Gresham, which is on the south side of Chicago, catalyzing opportunities for new business development and promote healthier lifestyles and well-being. It will host a 2-acre anaerobic digester that will divert inedible food waste from landfills to produce clean and renewable energy and nutrient-rich compost. They will use that compost as a needed input in their urban ag and to expand fresh local food and the production in the 7-acre urban farm on site and across Chicago, and also at the same time support workforce development in the green economy. They've also generating methane, and that will be put into the pipeline, and the carbon offsets will be sold into the carbon offset market, primarily in California. This is the most lucrative at the moment. With the research funding that we received, again, from internal funds, we're able to hire a graduate assistant to help us achieve the goals of our research project, which is to really map out assets and develop best practices for working based on this relationship that we've developed, but also what the other work that the university is doing. We have monthly meetings between our organizations and this has really helped us to develop a steady relationship with them. And we've been able to have many offshoots of this program, of this partnership. And I'll talk about that in a minute. We also have a project at the same time that was funded by the EPA within our Energy Resources Center called Teach Ad to help provide technical assistance for anaerobic digesters in the area. And so they're taking advantage of that as well. Next slide. So the things we've achieved to date, and this program really started in the fall, this fall, was we actually applied for something called the Climate Challenge Cup, which was a competition that celebrated innovative local solutions to global climate challenges, and a partnership between the research organization and a civic organization was what qualified. So we applied to this, and we were shortlisted as finalists that were featured at COP26 at an awards gala, and the winners were announced. And one of our one of the UGC staff were on site, were funded to attend through this program and able to accept the award that we won in the climate adaptation category. So that was very exciting. And then just 2 weeks ago, we had a tour of the site. It's still under construction with a number of UIC stakeholders, including our food scrap hauler who plans to divert our waste to this facility starting next year. We've made presentations, including the one today. And so we will continue, next slide, to work on gathering our assets and developing an asset map. We're also
Hi, Cindy,
looking-
you're at about 7 minutes.
Okay, I'll wrap up.
All right,
Just want to
thanks.
say we're looking at trying to develop some kind of MOU for campus community partnerships, and I'd love to hear about others who have done that. And you know, we feel this could scale up to other communities as well. So thank you, and I'll end here.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. I'm going to turn it over to John.
Oh, thanks so much. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm John Gardner, and I'm a planning and policy analyst with the Office of Sustainability at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. I'd like to talk a bit about our climate action planning process, specifically how we approached our stakeholder engagement, which we had to adapt a great deal during the pandemic. And then I'll wrap up about where we're going as we near our implementation stage. So real quick background, UWM's a public R1 research university. We serve about 24,000 students within the University of Wisconsin system, and we have a dual research and access mission. We're located on the north side of the city, and so we're just a few blocks from downtown and a few blocks from Lake Michigan. Our chancellor actually signed the climate commitment in February of 2017 on Valentine's Day. So it's taken us a while. But at the time, Kate Nelson, our chief sustainability officer, and I developed a sort of like working project charter for our leadership, which laid out the statement of need, draft timeline, the project team roles, and the amount of time we'd be requesting from the stakeholders, which we really tried to limit, recognizing that there were a lot of competing interests for time, especially with some budget and staffing, both shortages and crunches that we seem to constantly have. We were lucky, though, at the same time, to be participants and advisors to a regional resilience planning effort that was underway by our sewage district. So the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewage District does incredible sustainability work, and they serve about 28 communities in southeastern Wisconsin. So we had a really good base of understanding for what the local community's resilience challenges were, and we were able to build upon that to contextualize UWM's challenges. So I'm just going to share a slide real quick, or rather a screen. Overall, when we set up our project charter, we thought about our stakeholders in a few categories, at least at the outset. First, we had our executive sponsors. They'd champion the project. They'd be the link between the chancellor's office and ourselves. And then they would really support and approve the roles of any individuals we asked to be on the advisory team. And those executive sponsors were our VCs of Finance and Administrative Affairs, Student Affairs, and our Provost. We also had a core team, which was a very small team that would review all the sort of pre-planning work that we did. And that core team was made up of 2 faculty. We were very lucky to have a fantastic asset in one of our urban planning professors who does a ton of participatory planning, specifically in sustainability related and water related areas. And was also made up of our assistant vice chancellor of facilities planning and management, who our office directly reports to. Then the next group was our advisory team. So that was really our steering team. There was about 30 folks from across the university, faculty, staff, students, and community stakeholders. And that group, their role was really to provide professional expertise to help inform the development of our plan and to participate in all the planning meetings that we had set up. Kate has done an amazing job building networks across a ton of departments on campus. And so we already had relationships with almost all of the members on the advisory team. stakeholders were from, community-based and experiential learning, our multicultural centers, inclusive excellence, dean of students, facilities, risk management, transportation, all over. And we asked folks if they couldn't commit to nominate or send a proxy that could represent their department. And we had pretty good success with that. I think we had maybe like 4 or 5 folks who couldn't participate, but they sent someone in their stead, and we were really lucky to have them. We started off in the actual planning process by doing our resilience assessment. And so for the resilience assessment, we had this advisory team set up, and we sort of spread it out into 3 groups. A community, environmental, and infrastructural group. And those were based, it was based in part on the Nature Conservancy's community resilience building workshops. And so we invited the stakeholders within the advisory group to be part of those teams, with the caveat that they could participate in multiple teams if they chose, and some did. The operations folks were largely in the infrastructural group, and faculty and staff that conduct environmental community research or partnerships, they were most often in the community or in environment groups. We'd meet as smaller subgroups in person before the pandemic, and then reconvene as one big advisory group to make sure that we could like cross-pollinate the discussion and all the ideas generated among the groups. And so we were in the middle of this when the pandemic hit. And we really like to do in-person planning with whiteboards and just getting everybody in a room. And that was quickly shut down. So we had to figure out a way to do the planning remotely. And we settled on using Mural, a whiteboard collaboration tool that we had used a couple of times with our entrepreneurship center. And so that took a little bit of time to get going. At the same time, UWM in our office, like all of us, we're really focused on switching students to remote learning at the end of that semester, helping, students get computers, move out, like all those things, and trying to figure out what mandatory furloughs would mean for staffing at UWM, and how we would still do our planning work. So we shifted a lot of what we wanted to do complete with the stakeholder groups from that spring into the late summer and fall of 2020. And in the fall of 2020, we're lucky to find that a lot of the remote scheduling actually helped some of our stakeholders participate more, because they didn't have to travel all over our campus. They didn't have to compete with various meetings. They didn't have to take a bus 15 minutes one way and 15 minutes back to another building. And so that was a surprising but nice offshoot of transitioning to the remote planning style that we settled on. The big outreach that was really hampered by the pandemic, though, was reaching out to student groups. We had individual students that still participated in the planning sessions a lot, but we had really planned to bring draft updates to a bunch of student groups, and that was put on hold due to those groups not meeting. So we pivoted to seek that broader campus input once we were back in person in some fashion. After we completed the resilience assessment, we got into the climate action planning process whole, or sort of low carbon resilience planning. And again, we split up into 3 groups. I don't know, 3 seems to be a magic number, and we just—
Hi, John, about another minute.
Sounds great, thanks.
Okay.
And so we set up a mitigation working group, a community partnerships group, and a curriculum and research group. And those 3 groups, they were there to, of course, identify and prioritize solutions to reduce our emissions, plan responses to the climate impacts we can't avoid, and then support and strengthen community partnerships with curricular and research tie-ins, specifically related to the local adaptation priorities we delineated in our resilience assessment. We wanted to take a sort of coordinated low carbon resilience approach to both look at trade-offs and co-benefits of the mitigation and adaptation solutions, in the hopes that we could create some win-wins and save time and money and avoid building in some future vulnerability to climate risks. So with those 3 teams, we really were lucky that we had the advisory group, and then we had a bunch of groups beyond that. And so that I think we had about 90 participants in those 3 groups, and those groups would develop those solutions, and those would be brought back to the advisory team as well as governance group representatives. So this is where we put in our governance group reps. We asked each of the governance groups for a rep, and we wanted to sort of slow roll their have a nice little on-ramp for the governance groups to be able to participate. And right now, now that we've actually put together the plan, we're actually getting that governance group as a whole, their sign off on all the stuff we've done. So where we're going now is really, on the implementation side, we're really looking to finalize our governance sign off, and then kick off our implementation teams, which will mirror some of the setups that we've had already, looking at either assets by scope or for scope 1, 2, and 3, or looking at our resilience priorities through some sort of catalytic projects that we like to think of them as sandwich planning, where they build off some successes that we've already had, but they include some research that is pretty far down the line that we know that our university is going to need to do, and so find somewhere in the middle. So thanks so much, and I'll pass it on to Brooke.
Thank you, John. Brooke?
All right, thanks so much, John. So my name is Brooke Suter. I am on a goat farm in Barre, Massachusetts, which are the ancestral lands of the Nipmuc people. And I'll briefly talk about engaging alumni, which is such a great opportunity to forward climate action. So it might help to think a minute, are you an alumna, an alumnae of a college or university? And if so, with that hat on, has your school provided any opportunities for you to engage and support sustainability climate efforts, either on campus or off campus? And would you have appreciated it if they did? So, in my view, sustainability and finding effective ways to address the climate crisis is largely about crossing silos, and engaging alumni is one of those silos that we can cross when we talk about staff and students and faculty, and then pulling in alumni, because we know that students are future alumni, and they will be alumni far longer than they are students. So getting everybody engaged has been really great. So I come to you today as both a member of the Harvard Kennedy School Alumni Board, and I ran for the board. Well, I went to HKS after 25 years in climate policy, and then I ran for the board because there was a need for more sustainability integration, and also a member of the Harvard Alumni for Climate and Environment group. So let me give you a quick tour of some of the things that are happening so you can see what exists and think about what might be possible. I'm going to share my screen. So one place you can look is alumni groups broadly, the university-wide groups. So we just did the Harvard Alumni Association a few days ago, actually. We have a new vice provost, Jim Stock, for climate and sustainability, which is huge. It's a new position. And the Alumni Association did a panel with him and with 3 other faculty who worked on climate. So really introducing and engaging alumni to what's possible there. In addition, we have a specific group that is now the Harvard Alumni for Climate and the Environment. So looking to see if such a thing exists in your university or college that you might be able to connect with and activate. One of the things I really like, we just started this a year and a half ago. It's grown to 1,400 people so far. One thing that's very helpful is there are levels of engagement on the website. So you can see if you have an hour or less a month, here's what you can do. A few hours a month, and then very specific ways in which people can get together. A few hours a week and more. So, where's my, I didn't share the screen, did I? I'm not sure this is working.
So.
All right, so can you see the Meet Other Leaders screen, Michelle?
Nope. Screen sharing went away.
Screen sharing went away. All right, well then I will just talk because I'm almost out of time anyway.
And you can put
So,
links in the chat and we can share them afterwards too.
All right, sounds good. So I just wanted to point out that with alumni groups, there are university-wide opportunities, and there are also specific group opportunities. Within those groups, we, for instance, at the Harvard Alumni for Climate and Environment, created something called the Climate Boot Camp, which was a 9-month process. And it was a training for alumni who care about climate action but don't know where to start. And the core thing here that I wanted to share is that 1,400 alumni signed up for that, which is so amazing. When you think about all the things that people have to do, it was a 5-session event. So the idea that alumni don't have time or not interested definitely isn't accurate. And being able to reach out to them and get them engaged is something worth doing. We also had a campaign with Harvard Forward that worked to get climate-oriented candidates onto the Harvard Board of Overseers and onto the Harvard Alumni Association Board of Directors. So those are 2 places you can look: specific campaigns, university-wide alumni associations, and specific alumni groups for climate and environment. In addition to that, organizations like Sustainability UVA work to organize around a variety of groups on campus: the Career Center, the Sustainability Office, etc. So I'll highlight, as I close, a couple things to think about. Again, this is largely about connecting silos. So if you're looking at alumni organizations, look at the college and also look at grad schools. Look at operations and look at curriculum, and look at different levels of involvement that can be posted and easily accessible. Make it easy for alumni to help you reach your goals. And then also look for ways to support and value alumni in reaching their goals. So I encourage you to find ways to connect with them. I'm working now on creating some peer alumni support groups, small groups, 4 to 6 people for 10 weeks or so. I would love to brainstorm with people about that opportunity. And I'll do a follow-up document so you can have some of these links. So
Thank you very
so
much. Appreciate it. And while we pivot to Steve, I think we have time for maybe one question quickly. I am going to put the link back into the chat so that everybody here has access to the panelists' information. So I'll do that. And Steve, you have a quick question to ask before we move on?
Well, I don't think it's quick, but it is a question.
Love you, Steve. Nothing is.
Although I think there's a strong theme. This was a really interesting format, pretty incredible how much information was packed in a short amount of time. But the question kind of follows the theme about kind of the academic experience, so student and faculty opportunities. So for those that talked about the operational decarbonization strategies, can you share a little bit more about how students and faculty have been a part of that? And maybe one of you who wants to jump in. Cindy, Amy, Martha.
I'll just say really briefly, Steve, the genesis of that was really in the facilities department. So it took some forward-thinking maintenance manager, HVAC technicians, facilities director to invite an engineering firm with expertise in decarbonization, deep decarbonization, to present to us. And then really we had to build that case in facilities and bring it to the Board of Trustees, bring it to the staff and faculty. The staff and faculty participated in the Climate Action Plan, which gave the initial kind of overarching charge to become more sustainable. But the decarbonization efforts for us really stemmed from the facilities department, and our sustainability department is located in facilities.
Amy or Cynthia, I think Steve might have put folks on the spot in a good way.
We're not quite to that level of engagement yet, but we're getting there. For us, it looks a little bit different. We're a sort of traditional liberal arts school on the undergrad side. So we have, students who move into engineering, but we don't have like engineering here. We don't have a traditional business program. So for us, the ties to sustainability generally in this particular topic, it's a little bit more creative. It's, a little bit different than you might see at some other locations. we'll definitely have ties. We had an environmental study first year class that was really looking at decarbonization from a big picture standpoint and having students do some planning and thinking of their own. But we're still yet the jury's out a little bit on that, but there's definitely interest.
Our main way to engage students is through our internship program, but I also taught an honors class this semester. So a lot of it right now for where we're at, we have a plan, is making them aware of the plan and how they can get engaged. And whether it's through a project or through activism, I actually challenged my students this semester to propose an action. They proposed a petition to put a green roof on a building. Well, that's something. I was hoping they would want to march on the chancellor's office. Yeah, and then we invite, they're on our committee, and we encourage their participation through that and through the sustainability fee board.
Thank you very much. It was great hearing about such a diversity of different types of schools and progress that you've all been making. So I just want to express my thanks for being here today, and thanks to all of our participants.